This audio presentation of Hi Dad is brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. Written by Herbert Ewing Duncan. Executive producers: Scottish Rite Grand Commander James D. Cole, 33rd degree. Grand Master of DeMolay John Sellars, and DeMolay Grand Secretary Stephen E. Crane. Narrated and produced by Matt Bowers, 32nd degree. Consulting producer Dean Alban, 33rd degree. Hi Dad Book, copyright 1981. Audio recordings copyright 2023. All rights reserved. For information on how you can donate to support this audio serial, visit DeMolay.org. Chapter 11. With the Highest Honors. The 30th anniversary of the Order of DeMolay in March of 1949 came as the 20th century approached its halfway point to look back upon a decade of violence and change. Some observers commented that America during these years experienced a second revolution. World War II had burst upon the nation with the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. American boys were sent abroad and for 4 years were to be found on guard or fighting in every quarter of the planet. Peace finally came with the surrender of Germany on May 8, 1945. And the surrender of Japan a few months later on August 14, 1945. Just 5 days after, a new epoch in the history of mankind was ushered in by the explosion of the atomic bomb over Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. Slowly, the realization came that isolation was impossible, for never again would there be a spot on the globe in which America would not be deeply concerned, nor where it could fail to play a part. The death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on April 12, 1945, placed Harry S. Truman, for many years an intimate friend of Frank Land, as President of the United States. He assumed leadership of the nation and guided the San Francisco Conference, which gave birth to the Charter of the United Nations. Such an organization was necessary, for the world had finally realized as its dimensions had shrunk, and the tools of war had become so terrible that a revitalized morality among mankind was necessary if any nation was to live in peace. Our nation rose to meet the challenge of need felt by men and women everywhere in war-torn world. The Marshall Plan of June 5th gave economic aid to the hungry and distressed. The devastating destruction of war called for material help on a grand scale. President Truman launched a program to provide a means of technological and medical aid to the backward nations of the world. But all of this is not enough. Division and tension continued as the nations were drawn into a sullen conflict of a Cold War. Mr. Truman spoke of this in March of 1947. At the present moment in world history, every nation must choose between alternative ways of life. The choice too often is not a free one. One way is based upon the will of the majority and is distinguished by free institutions, representative government, free elections, guarantees of individual liberty, freedom of speech and religion, and freedom from political oppression. The second way of life is based upon the will of a minority, forcibly imposed upon the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, a controlled press and radio, fixed elections, and the suppressions of personal freedoms. The peace of 1945 lasted only 5 years, as American armed forces became involved in the Korean War, which was to go on from 1950 to 1953. Never in history had so much taken place in so short a time to change the thinking and motivation of the American people as in this decade of decision. Events of the times shaped the pattern of activity of Frank Land and the young men of DeMolay. They were not confined to an ivory tower of ideals, but were inspired to make a reality of the dreams they cherished. DeMolay was caught up in the action of the time. It felt the throbbing impact of changing conditions, of revised ideals, and a new national outlook. It was a time of adjustment and of new horizons. The Grand Master of the Grand Council, Judge William E. McKay of the Supreme Court of Los Angeles County, in his address to that group in 1949, reflected the new outlook and the dependence of the old generation on the vision and ability of the new generation by stating, "These are troublesome times that challenge the close and observant attention of every thoughtful person, These are the times that should quicken our thoughts toward great ideals. It is undoubtedly a fact that the hopes of the world are centered now, as never before so strongly, in the youth of the world. Men trained in old schools of thought and worn by the mental and spiritual struggle of adapting to these new conditions seek relief from future responsibility. Men, discouraged either by the inertia in their own ranks or by what seems to them lack of stability in the oncoming generations, seek a basis of assurance in regard to the future. Men, with whom the past is a sacred thing, and to whom successors who will cherish and protect these, jostle elbows in our crowded world with those who believe tradition and precedent to be a ball and chain hindering progress. Youth of America, it is at such a time, while the forces at the front in anxiety await the men of your generation, that you enter the training camp behind the lines to equip yourselves to take their places. Are there within your ranks the qualities of earnestness, intelligence, goodness, and forcefulness to justify the competence which the world wishes to repose in you? In distant years, when judgment is entered, may it not only be found that the generation of which you are a part understood and assumed its responsibilities, but also that specifically the promise of this fine group and the aspirations of this great country were realized, and that therein essential virtue was found and carried forth to dwell among men. Dadland was approaching the plateau of life that belongs to a man of 60. The years had been kind to him, keeping the signs of age from his face and bearing. His hair had thinned and the gray had turned to white, but the blue eyes behind the horn-rimmed glasses remained kind and understanding with a glow of recognition in greeting his nationwide circle of friends. Only a few lines showed in his face, giving added dignity to a mild and gracious manner. His dress had always been immaculate, and now showed the quality of tailor-made suits of gray or light blue which gave the appearance of slenderness to the added weight of middle years. Constantly in demand as a speaker and guest to add prestige and meaningful purpose to a meeting, his schedule was filled with engagements for a period of 2 years in advance. Occasionally, after months of travel, he would admit that he was tired and once remarked that he would like to have a normal life, even if for a short time. He took pride in watching his boys grow and said that the prime purpose of DeMolay was to create leaders in every field of human endeavor, to mold boys so that they would naturally lead others, in order that the world might be a better place in which to live. Thinking of the world-shaking events that pressed on every side, he would add, "Every worthwhile field of human activity can today cite leaders who came out of DeMolay ranks. It is a common saying that the Grand Council headquarters, that 6 times out of 10, when the newspapers of the nation carry the stories of leaders under 50, we can go to our files and find that they were active DeMolay in their teen years, and in nearly every instance, these men give DeMolay credit for having played some part in molding their lives. I refer to this because we have something in DeMolay that cannot be measured or weighed in the marts of trade. A whole world is looking at us and asking for our message. We must not fail as citizens, as leaders, and as men." Masonry, to Frank Land, was an important phase of life, almost a career. He held many Masonic offices. Among them was his year as potentate of Ararat Shrine in 1931 and as the sovereign of Mary Conclave of the Red Cross of Constantine in 1950. At the age of 35 on October 23, 1925, he had been coronated a 33rd degree, Inspector General Honorary and honorary member of the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. His position in the world of Freemasonry rose until in 1944, Senator Harry S. Truman telephoned from Washington to verify the report he had heard that Kansas Cityans were running land for Imperial Outer Guard of the Shrine, the first office in the line of succession leading eventually to Imperial Potentate. The rumor was verified, and at the Milwaukee Imperial Council session of that year, Senator Truman, only 3 weeks before the Democratic National Convention, which was to nominate him for vice president, spent 3 days working for the candidacy of his friend. He listened to the nominating speech of James E. Nugent, potentate of Ararat Temple in 1932. It is with pleasure that I come before you to bring you a name of a past potentate of Ararat Temple. He is a man who has been part of the civic life of our community, who has, at all times, engaged in those fine ideals which have for their purpose the perpetuity in the minds and hearts of the young men of this country, some of those things that can never be destroyed. He has demonstrated his loyalty not only in his relations with his fellow men, but in relation to 500,000 young men to whom he has brought something that has touched their life stream and brought them the inspiration of loyalty in its true proportions. And young men in their teens who are approaching those periods of life when things may be out of proportion need the guiding hand of experience and proper ideals. He is, and has been, identified with all branches of Masonry, and actively. He is a 33rd degree honorary Scottish Rite, a Knight Templar, a past potentate of his temple, and in each and every branch of Masonry with which he has been identified, he has graced it not only by his presence, by his work, and by his service. He has been an honor. And I may say this, as he has touched the various phases of the philosophy, of morals, and those attributes that make up the most beautiful part of Masonry, we find that the institution has been honored by his affiliation. I bring to you with all the power of speech, with all the depth of human feeling, with all of the emotion that causes the blood to surge from my heart, seeking to let it go down into the life stream of others. I am pleading at this time that the spirit of the past that has made the shrine may continue. So, nobles, today I present with pleasure my friend of a quarter of a century, my associate of so many years. I vouch for his integrity, his honesty, and all the things which men hold dear. I bring to you as a candidate for Imperial Outer Guard, illustrious noble Frank S. Land of Ararat Temple, the founder, the creator, the doer of so many things with respect to the progress of humanity, feeling, as I do, from the bottom of my heart that he will, as he goes into this line and approaches the place where the imperial potentate stands forth and stands out, bring credit to it. He will bring to it something from the simplicity of his life, and his faith will make itself manifest. Land was not elected, nor was he elected the following year. At the time of the 1946 session in San Francisco, Truman was President of the United States. The report came that the president was coming to San Francisco to work for his friend. He wasn't able to leave Washington, but Land was elected anyway as Imperial Captain of the Guard on July 24th to eventually serve as Imperial Potentate in 1954 through 1955. A program that Land called an historic event in the development of DeMolay came in 1948 with the enterprising formation of the DeMolay Foundation. DeMolay was then the third largest young men's organization in the free world. It had taken a generation to establish its position, and now to ensure the stability and survival of the organization, outside contributions were sought to support the educational program of DeMolay. The DeMolay Foundation Incorporated was incorporated August 3, 1948, under the general laws of the state of Maryland for the purpose of collecting, investing, and expending monies to further the religious, charitable, scientific, and educational activities of the Order of DeMolay. Approval was given by the Internal Revenue Department to proceed as a charitable organization to which contributions could be used in computing deductions on federal income tax returns. A momentous goal of $4,600,000 was set as the pressing need for this program to be used to benefit young men everywhere. The first board of trustees consisted of only 3 members, Frank S. Land, Edward A. King, and Bryce B. Smith. John H. Glazier, Director of Extension for the Grand Council, served as secretary. This group was later expanded in number to include Burl Berry, a business leader whose interests extended from coast to coast, to serve as chairman of this board. The Grand Council family was represented by the Grand Master, the Deputy Grand Master, and the immediate past Grand Master. Walter C. Ploser, during the 1950 session of the Grand Council, reported for the funding committee of the foundation that we must first do for ourselves if we are to march out into the highways and byways and ask others to do for us. Accordingly, it has been our opinion that if it behooves the Grand Council and its members in the various jurisdictions to put up the first and original expenses so that we might begin the organization of the work to interest others. It has been the thought of this group that we should proceed among ourselves to raise an estimated $50,000, which would be expended for the expenses to be incurred in the organization of a program which will raise the ultimate fund. The report was adopted. Pledges and subscriptions were reported in the 1951 session to be in the total amount of $22,003.50. This significant program outlined a broad scope of endeavor. A publicity brochure called for $900,000 to be used for educational work in expanding the activities and advantages of DeMolay with emphasis on a vocational guidance program and a safe driving campaign. The sum of $400,000 was to be used in a nationwide training program for adult and youth leaders for local DeMolay chapters with the hope that this program would include summer camps, regional schools of instruction, and national conferences. The major portion of the anticipated goal, amounting to $3,300,000, was for a scholarship fund to be used for the education of worthwhile DeMolays in the universities of their choice. It was estimated that the interest from this fund would provide 200 such scholarships each year for young men who might otherwise not have an opportunity to attend college. This ambitious program even called for the erection of a Frank S. Land Memorial Center to adjoin Supreme Council headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri, to serve as a nucleus of a youth leadership college and to house a DeMolay museum. This was approved by Dadland on the basis that it is distinctly and specifically understood that he did not originate the idea. Tremendous effort was extended by men across the nation, but the program never got off the ground. The Korean War became a drain on the resources of the nation. The youth of America once again took up arms against an aggressive nation, and interest in the foundation wavered. Periods of depression in the early 50s sapped the enthusiasm of those soliciting large sums for charitable and fraternal purposes. The financial goal was not reached, not even approached. Two definite values, however, came as a result. First, it showed the vision of Frank Land in continually seeking new approaches to an ever-advancing vision of DeMolay to better serve the youth of the nation. He never dreamed small dreams. Second, from the funds received, the DeMolay Foundation was able to launch a limited program. It operates now by granting some 40 scholarships each year, with preference given to active DeMolays or to sons or daughters of senior DeMolays. This scholarship fund is under the direction of the Board of Trustees, with Mr. William A. Hensley serving as chairman and an educational committee composed of Herbert E. Duncan, chairman, Edward L. Bittner, and Russell A. Peck. In a spirit of pride in his boys and to recognize the guidance given the nation by members of government, Frank Land now instituted an annual breakfast held on the birthday anniversary of George Washington, February 22nd. It was so planned as to coincide with the annual Conference of Grand Masters of North America. Here, in Washington, he served as host to honor the President, Vice President, Justices of the Supreme Court, members of the Cabinet, leaders in the Congress and administration, as well as distinguished Masons from every state of the nation. In 1950, the Frank S. Land breakfast held special interest, for during the afternoon, the Order of DeMolay was to unveil a statue of George Washington to stand in the George Washington Masonic National Memorial at Alexandria, Virginia. It was a gift to the Freemasons of the United States as a mark of deep appreciation and gratitude for the kindly interest that Freemasonry had always evidenced in this youth movement. The great statue of Washington is the first object to be seen by visitors as they enter the memorial structure. It stands in a circular niche with a high rounded ceiling in the rotunda of the memorial. A plate at the base indicates that it was given by the members of the Order of DeMolay throughout the world. It is the work of the late Bryant Baker, a renowned sculptor and a member of Constitutional Lodge No. 294 of Beverly, England. The statue shows General Washington in the Masonic regalia he wore as Master of Alexandria Lodge. It is 17 feet 4 inches in height, cast in bronze, and is estimated to weigh 17 tons, including the base, the statue, chair, and pedestal. The dedication and unveiling of the statue was under the direction of the Grand Lodge of the Commonwealth of Virginia, with the Worshipful Master of Alexandria, Washington Lodge No. 22, Godfrey P. Renal, as member of the DeMolay Legion of Honor, assisting in the ceremonies. Judge William E. McKay, Grand Master of the Grand Council of the Order of DeMolay, expressed the greetings of the order and the hope that in the years to come the statue may be the motif of many a pilgrimage on the part of our membership, where we may rededicate ourselves to the principles that gave us birth and happiness, and the peace and freedom we have so long cherished. Harry S. Truman, President of the United States, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri, and a member of the Executive Committee of DeMolay, made the address of presentation. In his speech, carried over the national networks by radio and television, he paid tribute to George Washington. It is a great privilege to dedicate this inspiring statue of George Washington. George Washington, like ourselves, lived in a period of great change, a period when new forces and new ideas were sweeping across the world. He was the leader of his people in a revolution against tyranny. He commanded an army in a long and bitter war. He was a major figure in the creation of a new kind of constitution. Finally, as the first president of our nation, he translated that constitution into a living government. Washington's efforts for freedom were twofold. He was concerned first with making the ideal of democratic government work. He was also concerned with the defense of that ideal against the forces opposed to it. The task of Americans today is fundamentally the same as it was in Washington's time. We, too, must make democracy work, and we must defend it against its enemies. But our task today is far greater in scope than it was in Washington's time. Not only are we concerned with increasing the freedom, welfare, and opportunity of our people, we are also concerned with the right of other peoples to choose their form of government, to improve their standards of living, and to decide what kind of life they want to live. This is a time of restlessness and change. In many parts of the world, men are searching for a better social order. They demand a way of life that will provide greater freedom and more widespread opportunity. They yearn to own the land they live on and to be secure against poverty, disease, and hunger. Above all, they want to live their own lives as they see fit. This rising demand of men everywhere for independence and a better life puts the ideals of freedom and self-government to their greatest test. Just as our 13 original states found that survival and progress depended on closer association and common effort, so the free nations of the world today must seek their salvation in unity and concerted action. The real strength of the free nations is not to be found in any single country or any one weapon, but in the combined moral and material strength of the free world as a whole. The progress we have made in this country since the days of George Washington is proof of the vitality and truth of the ideals he fought for. We must be no less firm, no less resolute, no less steadfast than he was. We move upon a greater stage than he did, but our problems are fundamentally the same problems that faced the first president of this nation: to make democracy work and defend it from its enemies. George Washington sought guidance from Almighty God as he faced these tasks in his time. Let us be guided today by divine providence as we strive for lasting peace with freedom and justice for all mankind. A new policy for Grand Council meetings began with the meeting of March 6, 1950 in Fort Worth, Texas. H. Malvern Marks, Executive Officer for Texas and who was to serve as Grand Master in 1953, was the host for this meeting. He talked with Land about the need for active DeMolay members to attend the meetings of the Grand Council, and from this conversation, for the first time, the state master counselors of the various jurisdictions were invited to attend. Also, during this session, a DeMolay was assigned for each member or deputy to perform such errands or services as might be required. Land was delighted, for here was a presence of the young generation, their ideas, their ideals, and their inspiration. During the 1954 session of the Grand Council, the name of that guiding organization was changed to the International Supreme Council of the Order of DeMolay. William P. Lombard, as chairman of the Committee of Jurisprudence and Legislation, moved the adoption of an amendment to the Constitution by striking out that section which read that this body shall be known as the Council of the Order of DeMolay, and substituting the following: this body shall be known as the International Supreme Council of the Order of DeMolay. The motion carried, and the Secretary General, Frank S. Land, with such other officers as the law may require, were authorized to proceed with the necessary steps to have the corporate name as it appears on the charter and elsewhere legally and properly changed by the state of Missouri, under whose laws we are incorporated. Life has been referred to as a mighty river formed by the tributaries of endeavor and experience. Frank Land, in July of 1954, began the year of his highest Masonic endeavor as he was elevated to the position of Imperial Potentate of the Ancient Arabic Order, Nobles of the Mystic Shrine of North America at Atlantic City, New Jersey, during the 80th annual session of the Imperial Council. The ceremony to honor his election took place in a huge auditorium on the famous boardwalk and consisted of a pageant portraying his life, his ideals, and his accomplishments. At the conclusion of the program, the jewel of an Imperial Potentate was presented by Senator Stuart Symington of Missouri. Some had expressed the fear that Land would drain the resources of the shrine in the support of DeMolay. Instead, he devoted the year of his shrine leadership to strengthening the Masonic fraternity. He knew that the progress of DeMolay depended upon a strong fraternity capable of supplying men of quality to serve as advisors for his chapters. Under the banner of New Horizons, his program was put into action. It called for all Shriners to concentrate on giving help to craft masonry, beginning with the Blue Lodges and extending through the Scottish and York Rite bodies. Masonic festivals were established in the various jurisdictions to assist the members of the Masonic fraternity in expansion, development, and comprehensive programs. He suggested that one vast community church service should be held in each shrine's temple jurisdictions and that councils of deliberation should be established to plan for the overall welfare of all Masonic organizations. The Ancient and Honorable Guild of the Leather Apron was created as a movement to recruit dedicated and enthusiastic Masons from all walks of life, to encourage them to apply their skills and know-how in a perpetual evangelistic campaign to reemphasize and revitalize the lessons and ideals of Freemasonry. The active year as Imperial Potentate reached its climax in Chicago on July 13th, 14th, and 15th, 1955, as Land presided during the Imperial Sessions. His annual report was printed, and as he spoke to the nobles, he said, "It is there for you to read. It has been written on planes and trains and everywhere else. I offer it to you as my address for the stewardship you placed upon me this last year." The report reads as though it had been written just after his election the year before, but shows the idealism of a man rising to the challenge of change, as was further expressed in his address as Imperial Potentate to the officers and representatives of the Imperial Council. "Yesterday, you paid me the great honor of electing me as your Imperial Potentate. With God's help and your good wishes, I hope to serve you worthily. Almost by the second, time marches on. Nothing stands still. Everywhere, humanity advances into new eras. It is off with the old and on with the new, and in each of our own lifetimes, the changes you and I can recall have been both amazing and fantastic. Many of us can remember the first electric light, the first telephone, the first motor car, the first radio, the first television, the first wonder drugs, the first material fabrics. On our comparatively brief time on this earth, we've seen the airplane come into common usage. We've seen the advent of radar, jet propulsion, atomic energy. We've had ringside seats at the greatest show on earth, that show being the March of Progress. And it is only the beginning. Far greater vistas are opening up for humanity. Never again will the clock be turned back. To keep pace and to assume its share of the leadership responsibility in this terrific thrust forward is our duty and privilege. That the Shrine has succeeded far beyond the dreams of its founders is proved by the Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children, the world's greatest philanthropy. Shriners are leaders in every walk of life. It can be truthfully said that no other group has proportionately provided the world with more or better qualified leaders. But to keep up with the parade, we cannot rest for a moment on the laurels already won. This would be sheer folly. It would not be faithful to our trust. Nobles, the time has come to destroy the obstacles that keep us from our rightful heritage. We ourselves are the only ones who can erase these barriers. And what are those barriers? Permit me to state the problem very plainly. The Shrine has more than doubled its membership in less than 15 years. This did not happen by chance. It was the pageantry, the splendor, and the good fellowship that made men desire to be Shriners. So down through the years, men began to have the urge to petition for Masonic degrees and then work their way up through the rites to the Shrine. A great majority of these newcomers accomplished the journey in less than a year's time. The result is that these newly created nobles do not stop long enough in the Blue Lodge, the bodies of the York Rite, or the Scottish Rite to learn anything about the traditions of craft masonry, much less the landmarks and the philosophy of the fraternity. One thing we must always remember, and it is this, that we are Masons first, and Shriners second, that if the Blue Lodge dies, the Shrine will die. Nobles, I am dedicating my administration this year to the major goal of erasing all obstacles that keep us outside that magic circle which houses the Masonic family. Annual Address of the Imperial Potentate. On July 1st, 1954, you paid me the great honor of electing me as your Imperial Potentate. With God's help and your good wishes, I have sought to serve you worthily. In the 12 months that have passed, I have never forgotten that humility and divine guidance have been my lodestar. A year ago, I was contemplating the beginning of the journey. Today, I am contemplating its ending. It has been a memorable experience, filled with an abundance of kind thoughts, friendly deeds, and far too many courtesies extended me by the nobility wherever I have traveled. We have sought to emblazon upon the banner of the Shrine that oft-repeated watchword, "In Masonic unity, there is strength." The year has been dedicated to a program of new horizons. You who have been in the vanguard of this endeavor know and realize how well we have prospered. The New Horizons program enunciated at Atlantic City has flowered beyond all expectations. As we approach the end of this journey, we see many things more clearly. It is sad but true that as we near the end of the journey, events move into sharper focus and their meaning often becomes more understandable. This is hindsight, and while hindsight never is nor can be as good as foresight, too few of us ever do much about substituting one for the other. Our trouble is not taking time early in life or often enough to evaluate events. Events are the handwriting on the wall, put there by history and intended solely for our contemplation, judgment, and proper and timely action. The reason we do not learn early enough in life to evaluate events is that we're too busy keeping up in the race of material things. In doing so, we lose sight of the bigger things, the real things in life. We become selfish. We become smug and complacent. Nothing matters but personal success, personal glory. And thus, the germ of apathy bores its way into our beings, and even in small doses, apathy invariably breeds destruction. That one single warning was the most pertinent of all, coming from the lips of Sir Winston Churchill during World War II. Sir Winston cautioned the Allies that apathy was more dangerous by far than all the Hitlers. Apathy is nothing more or less than the trend to let George do it. It is laziness in the nth degree. It is the shirking of responsibility. It is acceptance of the so-called inevitable. The greatest menace to Freemasonry today is apathy. And don't let anyone hoodwink you. Freemasonry can be destroyed. It can be wiped off the face of this earth. and all by nothing more innocent appearing and more venomous than the Trojan horse called apathy. You say that this is sheer poppycock, that nothing can or ever will erase Freemasonry from the face of this earth. Well, let's take a look at the facts, at some of history's handwriting on the wall. Far back in history, the Apostle Paul wrote on the wall the ageless warning, "Love never faileth." All else, said Paul, can come and go. Only love is eternal. And how has Paul's prediction stood up down through the years? In his essay, The Greatest Thing in the World, Henry Drummond amplifies Paul's cryptic statement. He cites the fact that even in its comparatively short lifespan, the world has seen basic languages come and go. He points to the Greek language, Latin, and to such tongues as the Indian, Welsh, and Scottish Highland, which are now in the process of passing into oblivion. Drummond points out that even knowledge comes and goes, being supplanted by new knowledge in the off with the old, on with the new trend that has been the rule ever since the days of the Garden of Eden. The steam engine replaced the ox cart. Diesel and electric power shoved steam into the background. And today, atomic power threatens to obsolete all forms before it. All over the world, we can see great stacks of scrap metal, the obsolete engines of yesterday. Drummond points to the change in textbooks, the change in medicines, the changes in myriad fields and areas of doing and thinking, and it all backs up the assertion of Paul that nothing is safe, nothing is sacred, nothing is assured life eternal, except love. Can you tell me anything that is going to last? Many things Paul did not name. He made no mention of money, fortune, or fame. He merely cited some of the great things of his time, things most men would regard as fixtures on the earthly scene, things the best men of all time up to then regarded as things with eternal life built into them. Paul brushed them aside. He made no charge against them. He merely said they would not last. They would be replaced as time went on. He admitted their greatness. He did not rate them as supreme. Yes, we've had ample warning that we can't be certain that anything but love will really last. So, let's not be smug or complacent relative to the longevity of Freemasonry. Let's not hoodwink ourselves into believing Freemasonry is less vulnerable than any other bulwarks that have been toppled by time and apathy. We can't do a thing about time. But apathy is something else again. Freemasonry, you say, is too big to topple. Well, so was the Greek language. So was the knowledge of Newton. So was the ox cart and the steam engine. So were a myriad other things that have been trampled underfoot and forgotten in the relentless parade of progress. What can we do about it? The Shrine and Freemasonry must keep up with the parade of progress, and the responsibility rests on the shoulders of every Freemason, every Shriner. What are we doing about it? Well, our New Horizons program has laid the groundwork for an all-out educational campaign to root apathy from the ranks of Freemasonry, the rites, and the Shrine, at least insofar as possible. In the last year, thousands upon thousands of Freemasons in the symbolic lodges, the Scottish and York Rite bodies, and the Shrine have enlisted in this most vital cause. The seeds of this New Horizons program thus have barely taken root in the friendly and fertile soil that is ours. Yet already from all segments and areas of Freemasonry come reports of tremendous initial progress. Now that the snowball has been started, it is the fervent hope and wish that it will be kept rolling and growing into a thing of such tremendous size that it will upset the declaration of the Apostle Paul that only love can live forever. Now is the golden opportunity for the Shrine to make a great contribution to Freemasonry and all of its branches. We of the Shrine have demonstrated amazing skills in doing those things that lay close to our hearts. What a tremendous shot in the arm we of the Shrine, with all our amazing abilities, skills, leadership, and pageantry, can give to Freemasonry if all of us go back to our symbolic lodges and the rites, and by attendance and offers of aid, re-educate ourselves in the obligations, traditions, and beautiful lessons of the craft. It can be done. In fact, it must be done. In no other way can the unity and solidarity be brought about to assure perpetuation of Freemasonry itself. No house can stand divided against itself. Our house is not divided. It merely needs shoring up, bolstering in places, to make it a solid wall. The New Horizons program, if utilized energetically and wholeheartedly, will help do the job. Truly, this is the Shrine's golden hour. There can be no doubt in any mind that God has showered His richest blessings on us. Our Shriners' hospitals for crippled children are acclaimed on every hand. The sun shines on our pageantry, our skills, and our abilities. The four winds of heaven have carried our message of Masonic unity to all children of the craft. We have been told that in the last year we have recorded more definite progress than justifiably had been anticipated in the next 10. We actually have molded a strong thread of unity in our very first year of organized effort. Certainly, the New Horizons program dare not be permitted to wither on the vine. We've started the ball rolling, and we're duty-bound to keep it rolling. And we must never forget, for an instant, that we're on the spot in promoting such a program.